Hello, everyone. I am so excited to see you today and to have this amazing conversation with none other than Jessica Balsley. So she'll be joining us shortly, but while everyone is logging into the live today, I would love to hear either where you're joining us from today or just a little bit about that mental health check-in. So pop in an emoji about how you're feeling today, maybe how you're feeling about going back to school if you haven't already started, and give us a few little emojis in the chat. So it looks like Jessica is already ready to be in the live. So we'll let her pop on here. This is very exciting. I'm super excited about this topic too, and I know Jessica is incredibly passionate. Hi, Jessica.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so psyched that you are joining us. This is going to be a great conversation today.
Yeah, this is so fun.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So obviously, a lot of you probably know who Jessica is, but because you are joining us today on the chat, can you tell us just a little bit about your role and what you play as part of the Art of Education University?
Absolutely. Well, I am one of the founders of the Art of Education University. So before 9 years ago, it was just sort of an idea in my husband Derek and I's head to start a professional development growth company for art teachers. And so it was started with a blog and sharing ideas from my own art classroom. So I was an art teacher, and it kind of snowballed from there to where we are today. So
it's grown a lot.
Yeah, it has.
Probably wouldn't expect it to look like what it looks like today 10 years ago when you started, or so long ago.
No,
so,
not at all. But it's been better than ever because we've been able to help a ton of art teachers, and the need is still there for good professional development. So
absolutely. And that's kind of the cool thing too, is the fact that you had a classroom of students, so you were really touching the lives of many students, but then with the Art of Education being such a huge platform, it's like thousands of kiddos and teachers get that really awesome professional development. So I'm excited to talk to you specifically about your recent article that was published. I saw it posted and I was like, oh, this is perfect. It is called How to Manage Change with a Leadership Mindset. And I know you speak a lot about leadership with the Art of Education team, and it's a huge passion of yours. So can you kind of go into like why you're so passionate about leadership and what brought you to share that information with our readers?
Yeah, absolutely. So, leading art teachers was where I kind of started in my career. And then it kind of shifted actually from leading art teachers to leading our team at the Art of Education University. And the team supports art teachers. So I'm not really on the front lines anymore, but leadership is something that I think it's all within us and it's all there. So they say everyone's composed of a few themes in their life, and leadership is one of mine. I was like the kid at leadership camp, in the summer. And so for me, like my definition of leadership is leadership is a mindset, not a title. And so we all know people who have been granted this title of leader and they don't act like a leader. It's just a title. And I believe that every single person has in them those leadership capabilities. You can grab that opportunity if you want it. You can have agency if you want it. It's within you. It's how you view yourself. It's all about that self-leadership. And then I really love the idea of self-leadership before servant leadership. So self-leadership is like managing ourselves and our own little four walls of our classroom, our the way we carry ourselves, our day-to-day, our routine. And then only once you have that kind of solid can you really begin to impact others. So if everyone right now probably feels like as they're getting ready for school, like, okay, how am I supposed to figure out my life, my own kids going back to school, my own job before I can help these kiddos coming in? So I'd really say like, yep, put your mask on first, just like in the airplane.
Yeah.
Figure that out.
Metaphorically and realistically.
Yes. And then think about how you're going to impact others. And that continuum, doing those things in that order, will help you feel less chaotic. And then servant leadership is sort of a really fun thing to look up if you haven't, but it's leadership isn't do this for me, I'm your leader. Like if your principal has ever done things like that, where it's just like you do this for me and do this for me, it's more about like what I can do for you. How can I help make your job easier? How can I help make your life easier? How can I help you? So if we think of ourselves as servant leaders, then it's like, how can I best serve my students, my community, my colleagues at this time? You're going to be solving problems as a leader. And so it's just all part of that mindset of a leader versus the title.
I love that.
I feel helpless right now.
Oh my gosh. And that's part of it too, is I think there's so much that art teachers and teachers and people in general just want to be able to control. And it's it's scary that we don't feel like we have a lot of control, but just breaking it down into those two categories of, okay, that kind of self leadership and really just sort of taking a peek at where you feel like you are. Okay, do you feel like you could help someone, knowing that that is the top priority, is to take care of yourself first? And then, of course, being a teacher is serving our students, right? So then how does that shift towards using that energy to then lead our students towards success? So I think that's a great way to kind of break it down simply. And of course, that article that you recently wrote is a great, quick, succinct way to break down that too. And there's actually, I think, like 3 downloads in that. There's definitely like a few posters, and then we'll get to one of the other fun worksheets at the end as well. So kind of speaking to that a little bit, because so much is changing in our world and it's really unknown, something that stuck out to me in the article was just the fact of recognizing our stages of grief and how we sort of process that information through leadership. So like months ago, kind of when the pandemic really hit the US, there was a lot of like trying to work through those feelings. But can you break down what that specific chunk of like stages of grief look like, and how you feel like it's important for teachers to work through that in their classroom or on their own?
Yes, absolutely. So stages of it's not grief, but it's just I like stages of change, or they come from that. But big life events cause us to go through this continuum, and I like this wording I got from the in the article. I linked the source there, but the first is like skepticism. I'm under reaction, I'm stuck, I'm just like paralyzed. Like we all felt that day, the day we got the call that like you're not going back to school tomorrow in March, and this is happening now. Like no one's ever heard of this happening before. And then you go into alarm, like you're very reactive and chaotic, and oh my gosh, what about this and what about this, right? And we all been around people like that, but staying there is kind of like you can't move forward. And then you go into this period of adjustment. So sort of like I'm in trial and error, I'm tweaking, I'm changing, I'm trying things now that I've gotten over the initial shock. And then the last one is sustainability, which I have proven processes that work. And one might think that sustainability is the ultimate goal, right? Like I need to get to proven processes that work.
Like it feels that's where you'd want to
be. But the interesting thing is every single time you receive a new piece of information, you start over on these stages of grief. I think someone just put in the chat, like, I think I go through all these things in one day. Well, like how many new pieces of information have you gotten in one day, right? Yeah. And so like just even being aware of this is helpful, because like you're going to go through it, you are, and it's the faster. So sustainability is not actually where to stay right now. It is maybe in another world, like, but it's adjustment where you want to be. You're tweaking, you're changing, you're trying, you sustain a little bit of it, but you go back and tweak because you just got new information. And I can be stubborn and bullheaded sometimes when I get a big idea, like I'm going to keep going with this big idea. But if things around me change and the landscape changed, it's almost foolish to stick with the original plan. Like, how can I make it better? How can I tweak? So adjustment, tweaking, changing is really important for us to keep in mind, and just that flexibility, but it's hard.
I think it's totally hard. And I think that's, again, when reading the article, that's something that stuck out to me is I feel like, and I don't know if other people feel this way too, but I put these expectations on my feelings or on my energy where I'm like, okay, you got to deliver, you got to be super strong all the time. But realizing like some days your expectations maybe just need to be a little bit lower because you're in a different stage of your understanding or a different stage of change where it's just, you're not going to be at that really high sustainable level. It's going to be more, okay, right now we're starting back at school or whatever. So I'm going to be in that sort of flexible change sort of state. So recognizing that, like, can you identify what stage maybe you're in or what you think you're coming out of? And that'll give you a little bit better direction to like address the way that you're feeling. And it really, I feel like it gives you a lot of power just to break it down into those little steps. So I think that was really, helpful to see. And I really enjoyed that too. So I guess that kind of brings me to my next point, which is just the fact that as art teachers and teachers, we, as much as we can, are trying to stay positive, although it is very difficult because sometimes it's really hard to feel like you don't have a lot of control over things. And I know some of the people in the chat were even just mentioning the fact that like it is a roller coaster of emotions. You're feeling so many things. So can you help us a little bit figure out what, how we can use that positivity to continue more of a leadership mindset compared to a follower mindset, which is, again, another awesome download in the article, but like just comparing those two, leaders versus followers, and how we can stay positive through that, that mindset shift.
Sure. Well, the number one thing that's helped me through just building AOEU, because there's a lot of change and growth and such, and I think it's just transcends, is I may not have the answer, but I always believe in myself, in my ability to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like that is really connected to me to staying in adjustment mode. Like I can figure it out. We can do this. Okay, this is different. Okay, what could we do? Who could I ask? How can we figure this out? If you believe you can figure it out, you will. And so, that leadership mindset believes you can have agency for change. You can change
Mm-hmm.
things in your circle of control. A leadership mindset finds a solution, finds a way to make it better, not focusing on the negative. Or you focus on the negative and you quickly move into, have your moment, and then
Sure.
like, this is the reality, move on. And
Yes.
then this one's kind of like a leadership mindset accepts that it's going to be hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is going to stink, but I'm going to plow through anyway, because the only way to is through.
Yeah.
You're not going
You
to
don't
just,
have another
you
option.
can't run out the door if your students are staring at you, looking to you. And so suddenly we're going to plow through, and it might be messy, but we're in it.
Yeah.
And then like sometimes people think, well, it's happening to me, not,
Mm-hmm.
it's like all happening to me. And so just trying to find ways where we can say, have that agency. What can I do to make this better? Do I
Right.
have any say in this? And I always, my own four walls of the classroom was where all of us do have our own most agency. Like we can't
Right.
control a district policy. We can't always control that everyone has to wear a mask. The second they enter your room, like what magic you bring, will be the agency that you have the first one. So it's like self
Absolutely.
leadership, classroom leadership, then maybe district leadership.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I feel like, too, just sort of bouncing off of that a little bit, because sometimes as educators, again, those expectations are usually pretty high, and we just expect it to be perfect all the time and really good and strong and put out this really beautiful product. But knowing that sometimes it's just going to be what it's going to be, and that the fact that we're changing and the fact that things are constantly moving and adapting makes it so that that expectation is going to be a little bit different. And I like before when you said that, things change all the time, and it doesn't mean it's like a bad thing. It's just kind of like readjusting that control in your brain a little bit too. Something that I always remember when I've been at two school positions. So I taught for a few years at one school and then transitioned to a different school. And I missed that first school so much, and I was so afraid to leave that position. But my mom said, okay, change is hard, but it can also be good. So really, you're basically just saying, what's your mindset going to be, and what are you going to
Yeah.
choose? Like, of course, we all wish we could change things right now, but there's only so much we can actually control. So I thought, kind of speaking to that sense of control and the fact that, yes, there are hard things, and yes, there are negative things that we wish we could change, but really searching for those positive things, you can kind of focus on that and reframe your thinking a
Yeah.
little bit too.
Like this year will not look like last year, or this start of this year doesn't
Nope.
look like it. So comparing, it's going to be very hard. So one thing, like, are kids making art?
Yeah.
Yes. You're winning. Like, is it okay to have grilled cheese for supper like 3 nights in a row? Yes. Did people
Yep.
get fed? Yes. Are
They're
kids
fine.
making
It's
art?
fine. Yeah.
This is fine.
Yes. Yes.
Did they leave with a smile on their face? Yes. If those are your two goals, you're winning. You might not do that really cool iPad project that you had planned, and you might, but that's okay. So I think
Yeah.
that's like your new school year expectation
Yes.
thing too. Like,
Yes.
this
Giving
is
yourself
not
that.
the old school. This is the
Right.
new school.
Exactly.
What is the reality on the ground? So
Exactly. And kind of giving yourself that grace a little bit too, just to say, like, it's okay. You might expect things from yourself, but like, we have time to edit and try those other things too. And maybe you'll discover some really awesome things, that this is an opportunity to try, a simpler way to do something, or a different way to do something. And there can be really positive parts that come out of that. So I think reframing that mindset is just incredibly important. So I really love that too. So speaking to the article a little bit, as far as what kind of downloads and things were in there, there's one that is a few of them are like posters about agency for change, and a leader versus a follower mindset, and just giving yourself a few little reminders about those things. But the one that I really loved, and I printed it off on my black and white printer, was the art educators energy assessment. And of course, with AOEU, we always direct everything towards art educators, but really anyone could take this test. Like I showed, or this little, fill out this little worksheet. I showed my husband and I was like, oh, this is interesting because I'm really thinking about the difference between these kinds of energy. So I just wanted to have everybody take a little bit of a moment, and Jessica and I are going to just work through how the worksheet works and how it could be a fun way for you to just check in on yourself, because sometimes, at least I find myself, when I sit and think about how I feel, or I just check in mentally, I maybe wouldn't put as much energy towards it because it's just a thought. But when you have to write it down, or when you're really like asked to like dig in a little bit deeper and list stuff, it's like, oh, like literally I was filling it out this morning. I'm like, oh, this is a little tricky for me. Like I gotta really like put these in my categories in a good way that I felt like it was a good challenge. So there are basically 3 sections. Well, actually, why don't you tell us about the types of energy, Jessica? Can you just speak to those?
Yep. There's mental energy, so your ideas, your thoughts, your processing, your physical energy, the body movement, and then emotional, which is feelings, or my favorite, your general state of being.
Right.
Like, what is baseline? Like, just, is it chaos? Are you in chaos as your general state of being? So, which is different than your ideas and thoughts. So I think that's kind of, and then for some people, spiritual could be added to that if it's important to you. I didn't add it to the worksheet, but I just thought I'd make a note of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's nice that it's broken down pretty simply, and they're all different from each other. But I thought it was kind of interesting how much some of my mental and my emotional was sort of intertwined, honestly.
Sure. Your
like
thought might spark the emotion, and then
I was like, oh, I think I'm stressing about this because it's like sort of my mental state, but because I'm like emotional about it, or because I feel I'm so connected to the feelings with it, it was really interesting to start writing those things down. So I would highly encourage anybody to just take a peek at that worksheet and try it. We'd love to see, or just do it on your own too. But so those 3 mental, physical, and emotional energies are really cool to take a look at as an actual person doing the worksheet. But I also wanted to say, like, we should probably be checking in with our kids about this too. Like the students that you teach, whether you're online or, I mean, I'm scheduled to be art on a cart in a couple weeks here. And I know my focus is going to be so heavy on social emotional learning and checking in with my students mentally, because we're all kind of having this like a collective trauma kind of thing, which I know we'll be speaking about at a different IG Live. I'll be talking a little bit more to that too. But basically what I'm trying to say too is that, yes, it's important to check in as a teacher and an educator, but that your students check in is like also important. And teaching them how to recognize, like, hey, your mental health, like, how are you, can have a different answer about how you kind of feel in your head and how you feel in your body, and sort of explaining that difference. So let me tell you what I did in my worksheet.
Yeah, let's do a little live coaching here.
Do a little live modeling. Like, well, Jessica's my teacher, your student. So the first column here just says, like, what's the type of energy? So the first one is mental, and then there are 2 little columns. The first one says, what is taking energy? So the prompting question is, what worries you most? And then you're encouraged to brainstorm solutions or options or ideas. So my list of like what I'm worried about mentally is connecting with my students when I see them, just because I'm a very like, I have a lot of facial expressions, and I have a lot of expression, and I'm worried that I won't be able to connect in person with them, or if we do end up being virtual, just that like connection with students. So I'll just list how I feel first, and then maybe you can help me with what that would maybe look like if it was, like what an option could be for the end. And then just some like logistical things too, like my mental energy goes towards planning lessons that are appropriate for art on a cart, because that's what I'll probably be, or like literal logistics of doing demonstrations in class. So how am I teaching the lesson? How am I like going to make this interesting? Because as much as we want to have a high product, it's like, how is this actually going to happen? So mine were definitely connection, planning appropriate lessons, and then just like presenting the demonstrations, particularly with like a mask on and stuff. I just feel like I'm going to be stuck in my expressionless face.
Yes.
So what would
you take, like, connecting with your students, for example, like, just because that's kind of the expression and also just the feelings they're having, like what are some things you could do to connect with them, regardless of a mask, regardless of art on a cart, regardless of not being able to get close to them?
Right. I mean, some ideas that I brainstormed, which I'd seen a lot of other teachers in schools doing, like buttons with faces on them so that you can like see a happy expression for someone. Or like we always would do these different sort of like kind kid welcoming entrance high five things, but obviously we wouldn't want to do that. So maybe like making up some like distanced hand signs, or doing like a cool fun like
chant or song or
yeah,
something.
like
Yeah.
a song entrance. I know when Lindsay and I were talking about art in a cart, like Lindsay was talking about the Crayola song "There's No Color for Your Eyes," and how she'll be playing that every time she enters the art room or like enters another classroom. So maybe just trying to focus on like a couple little
Like
special
routines
things.
or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, like a tradition, so it just feels
Oh,
sort of
yes.
special.
Anchor
And
tradition. Hmm.
kids love routines, and I do too, because it helps me sort of ground myself a little bit. So that will
Hmm.
probably help for the connection.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And then the next I was thinking, it's again, this is the sort of logistic part. So it's like planning lessons, doing the demonstrations. And my suggestion for that I thought it was just like the actual like, okay, I should probably just video record myself like giving a demonstration so that I can be a little more expressive. And that way people, my students can see my face a little bit more, and then I can do sort of a flipped classroom. And there may be a little less pressure to try to have this really high performance if I'm struggling that day, because I'll already have the video done. So that's an option that I have.
That's one option. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else could you do? If that flew out the window, what else could you do?
Right. I wrote generate lists, because I'm the kind of person that like, if I'm stuck, I'm like, okay, I could do this lesson, or I could do this lesson, I could do this lesson. And luckily, like, I mean, I know the writing team has so many articles coming out that I'm super psyched for everybody to see, but there's so many lessons that are like 10 easy lessons to do with this thing, or 20 easy lessons to do in this way. So I think I just need to remember that there are things that exist and there are resources, and I don't need to do it by myself,
Hmm.
but like use that community.
Yeah.
Hello, the art of education, and so many other amazing educators to build a good base, so it doesn't all
Hmm.
have to fall on me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and then another question you could ask yourself when you're doing the options of like, what would the simplest version of this be? What would
Oh,
like the path of least resistance be? And I didn't say easy or
yep.
low quality, but
Right.
if this was at its simplest, most basic form, what would it be? And maybe like, maybe it's using pencil drawing only for the
Yeah.
first month of the entire school year, and we just really focus on value. And that would be allow you to demo in person, no weird supplies, get used to the cart, and then maybe we add like, you can even on Flex Curriculum, you can like pull down by media. So
Yeah.
you can just do colored pencil or just pencil. Like that seems so like, well, that's boring. But what would the simplest form, bare bones, look like? And
Right.
could we still be making art with kids? And would they be smiling at the end?
Yeah. It's so much about the way you present it and the connections you make with students. So it's not super, it doesn't have to be super complicated.
Yep. Do you want to link the
Mar
article?
Yep, we will link it after this. So
Yep.
the article I'm
Perfect.
speaking to is just about creating or the one that Jessica wrote, how to manage change with a leadership mindset, and it came out a couple days ago. So we'll post it again in the Instagram stories after that, or if you just search, the artofed.edu, you will also find the website that has all of the linked magazine articles in there too. Okay, so let's just keep going down that list a little bit, because that mental energy, like I said, sometimes got connected with my emotional energy. And I'm curious if anybody feels like yours would get kind of intertwined too. So feel free to comment if you're like, yep, I feel like they're both kind of the same thing, or that they get mixed up a lot. But the next one was a little bit easier for me to dive into, and that was the physical energy. So that's just like my body movement, how I like actually feel in my physical body. So the question there that was kind of the question to start with your brainstorming was, what is your body doing that's depleting? So thinking about like, there's this cool article about like each day you wake up, you have like 100 bars of energy. And every
Mm-hmm.
time you say something or do something, a bar, you're giving a bar, right? You're giving all these little notes. And by the end of the day, things are depleting in a way that you maybe feel like you didn't even know where all of your energy went. So asking like, what is your body doing that energy is depleting? So I just wrote like transitioning from being online to art on a cart, because I was virtual. So I'm like sitting at a desk like this. And though it takes energy, it takes a lot less energy than like running around, carrying art supplies, loading this, opening this, moving, it's just it's more physical. We don't usually sit down, if at all, as art teachers. So I'm worried about, I feel like I'm concerned about that for my energy. And then I also just wrote, like I have a lot of anxiety. So I was just a little bit nervous about like breathing in the mask. And I know it's a necessary component to if we do return in person and just the health of our world. So I have no problem wearing one. I just have to kind of get in my own right mindset to be able to like feel that endurance. So those were my physical
feeling on your body. There's a thing on you.
Yes.
But when you go to options too, like when you just think about mask alone, like you could try 5 different masks till you find the one you like the best. You could bring back up, like there's so many options that could make it easier if like that adjust. Yep.
You just have to like push through it and actually do it. But identifying like, oh, I am a little freaked out about that. And I probably maybe would have been like a fleeting thought had you not started like thinking about it. You'd just been like, oh, maybe I'm worried about this, but it's not a big deal. But writing it down, I was like, oh yeah, I need to address that. In fact, I see I know Megan just linked the article in here, and again, we'll link it to in the Instagram post and the story after this. But somebody said, yeah, breathing in a mask, it is nerve-wracking. And actually, I have an article coming out so soon about just like 10 tips for mask wearing. And I noticed and researched a little bit about mask anxiety and how you can battle that a little bit. And I found it very interesting and very helpful. So
very timely, because it's just something that the whole world is getting used to.
Absolutely. So be on the lookout for that. In fact, next week's Instagram live here on the Art of Ed Instagram page will be about like masks and a couple special tips and hints for you. So it's like super perfect. Okay, so
back to your energy thing too. Yes. I thought of another thing when you talked about the energy bars. I've loved thinking about that in the past. One thing that helped me was like before I even walk in the door to my classroom, where did I just exert a bunch of energy? It doesn't start at 100 when you walk in your classroom, especially if you have a commute or family or pets to get out or all the stops to make, errands to run, and like what would the simplest form of that look like? And there was a few weeks there was like my kids are eating breakfast at school and daycare. I'm not cooking a breakfast in the morning because that is too much for me right now. Just little things like that, like set yourself up for success. Like it doesn't have to be the way it was to be good.
You're right.
I'm going to teach my older kids to make their breakfast, or I'm going to get a capsule wardrobe so I'm wearing the same uniform every day, so I at least don't have to think about that. Like, I don't know.
Yes.
Those are all tips to help with that physical energy.
You're right. Yeah, I love that too. And I think like I get caught up in the mental energy on the way to school. Like, okay, what's my mindset? But just thinking about literally what has your body done to prepare for the day. If I'm nervous about like my breathing or my mask, maybe I need to like set aside a couple minutes to really get a good meditation in the morning. That was one of my suggestions. The prompting question was, how could you give life and energy to your body? Which I love the way that that's phrased, because I feel like sometimes our body just comes along for the ride, but we don't always remember like, oh, I need to take care of this. This is like my shell. But I said, a stretch after work or taking a walk at lunch.
Take a break.
Take a break. Just do a quick walk around school if possible, or like meditate, building my endurance, like specifically for, mask anxiety. So trying to wear one at home and just really practicing that calm breathing might be helpful. So I was able to list a few options and feel good about sort of like getting all of that out. What does it look like physically to drain? And then how
in that case, like you may not do all those things every day, but you have this toolbox, this toolkit, this little list to go to.
Yeah.
Well, some days you might not even need the tools in that box, and other days you might, but since you've thought about it and you at least have a toolkit list, you can draw from it and just be more proactive with it.
Exactly. And every time you say something like that, it just reminds me about how much our students need that too. So everything you're learning and feeling like you finally have at least some sort of control to process the thought for, like even just having this conversation and being able to write down things is helpful for me, and teaching those students to say, okay, so here are some tools. Here are some mental tools if you're feeling like you're a little bit stuck some days. And I know we give those to our kids in some ways, but making them really attainable for them and really easy to understand, and trying to be that coach for how they can be the strongest person possible in whatever energy they are using that day is going to be a really cool way to connect with them. And they need those tools. And if we don't tell them or point them out to them, sometimes it's really hard to recognize, so as a kid,
we don't even have to talk about it in the art room. We can actually get it out through art, even if it's just listening to calm music while you sketch. I mean,
You're
it
right.
doesn't have to be, maybe that's all that kid
Yeah,
those students needed that day.
you're right.
Again, back to not this monumental multimedia project. That'll come. There might be one throughout the year, but
Yeah, yeah.
what looking at their day and what they needed.
Right. That year is going to look a little bit different, but what's most important right now for our students, and that's why kind of really building your own leadership so you can be there and show up for them is something that I think all of us can focus on. Okay, well, let's do the last one really quick.
Okay.
The last one I had as kind of a type of energy to take a peek at was emotional. So for this one, it just kind of reminds us about the actual feelings and general state. So when somebody says, how are you? You're probably going to just be like, fine. But if you answer that question of how are you, that's like your emotional state for the day, right? Typically. I mean, you can say, I'm tired, that's physical, but most likely you're like thinking inside about what your actual feelings are. So the prompting question for that one was, what are your negative feelings? And then that prompting question too at the end of how to find those options and solutions was, what would help make your mindset more positive? So again, I love that this worksheet is like, hey, let's really reframe to make it positive. You can have that negative feeling, you can address it, but just like watch it be a passing car or a floating leaf in a river, acknowledge it, and then like just you have to let it go because it's going to hurt you more to live in that negativity.
Mm-hmm.
So my list of negative feelings were just like literally getting anxiety at school. So like having a really anxious moment. What if I panic, or how do I solve that problem? And then again, touching on like worry for my own students' social emotional health. So like me just being very sensitive to the fact that if I'm feeling things, they're probably feeling things and may not even be able to identify them as much. So that is a concern. And then I just said like, potential isolation from like staff or students or, as art teachers, we're already kind of doing our own thing, which can be really awesome. But sometimes it's harder to connect to our staff or, our kiddos if we are a little bit more separated, a little bit more kind of in a unique place. So those were my like my emotional drains where my energy felt like it was being pulled.
Yes. And so what would help turn those around to a positive? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen,
right.
even if you do get an anxious moment at school? Like, what you might have, like, it might come and go. You might work through it. You might have to step out. I mean, and when you even go on, the worst thing that could happen is you can't teach the rest of the day. You have to go home and rest and you come back tomorrow. Like, and that's not even that bad when you think about it, but that seems like horrible in your mind, right?
Right. But sometimes it's just saying that out loud where you're kind of like, hey, I'm nervous about this. And then somebody else or your support system, like here I was just saying, build a support system so I don't feel like I'm alone. So if I'm kind of like, oh, I'm a little bit off today, I feel like I need some support, then I can tell one of my trusted coworkers, or I can, kind of talk to somebody that I can just quick message or whatever. And usually just knowing that somebody knows, hey, I might need a little bit of support today makes me feel like I can do what I need to do. And, as a person who's been an anxious person my entire life, I have that toolbox of ideas where I'm like, okay, I can kind of like figure out what I need this day. And maybe a kiddo might not as much if they might get a little bit more nervous and don't know how to solve that problem. So I think I could probably figure out something for that, but it doesn't mean that I'm not anxious about being anxious, because that's a thing, right? Does it make sense? No, but there it is.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think just then kind of finishing down with some of the options that I was thinking for change, we're just continuing like to collect resources and find that support system. So when I'm looking for like social emotional things for my students, or concern with like how I'm going to support myself and my students mentally and emotionally, just like literally collecting as much as I can without getting overwhelmed so that I can have this huge toolbox of ways to support my students, I think is already a great option.
Yeah, those are great options.
Yeah.
One little kind of piggyback off that is more of a quote, or kind of a, not segueing into wrap up, but good work on your worksheet, by the way, Sarah. Like, no, it's hard to write that down and to share it here in the world. I mean, like, everyone's going through it, and sometimes just knowing someone else feels the same way as you helps normalize it. And then once you're normalized, you're like, oh, everyone else is feeling this way too. Now it's normal. And now if they can do it, I can do it. You know,
Yeah.
we've all got this. But it's
Mm-hmm.
the idea that energy, I can't remember where I got this, but energy flows where attention goes. So if you're focused so much on what might go wrong, or what if I do get anxious, or what if the mask is hard, then you're going to put all your energy toward that. What
Right.
if we all focus this school year on putting so much energy toward making the most positive experience with what we had? And what if you were so distracted and absorbed with that
Yeah.
the other things just became annoyances to you
Right.
because
You
you're
don't have
so
I don't have
focused
time to be
on,
anxious. I
I don't
can't
have time
worry.
for this. These kids need
Yeah.
me, and I'm going to make this the best it can be. And I know that sounds very Pollyanna, but sometimes we have to not fake it till we make it, but you're telling yourself first so you can believe it, and then you can
Right.
put it out. It's not going to help to start from that standpoint,
Yes.
or at least not stay there.
Right.
Remember the staying in the flexibility. So
Yes. And knowing that we're going to go through all of those stages and all those feelings multiple times, and to never have an expectation that you'll live in one specific spot, but being able to give yourself the tools to go through those issues. If you're feeling a certain way, it's like, oh, I've been here before. I've visited this little town of,
the
grief or whatever.
stages.
I've
Yeah.
been
Yep.
here.
I've been here. We're just in this mode.
Yeah.
We're in acceptance mode, and I'm accepting, and then I'm going to take action tomorrow.
Yep. Once I
and
can get through it. Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
not over. And I hate to be like Debbie Downer on that too, but it's just like there will be more change. The way
Yep.
almost everyone's school year is starting may not be the way it finishes, and it may change 5 times in between. And so, like, if you can do anything to set yourself up for success, it's like um, acceptance to change,
Yeah.
and being able to be just like sort of this nimble, um, flexible kind of Gumby that can just roll with the punches. So like if the waves are going, like they're not taking you down, you're just going to ride them on
Mm-hmm.
top very, very gently.
Yep. We just.
And I'm on a wave, it's going up, but I'm still on top of it. I'm just riding the waves.
Yep. Yeah. I love it. I love it. That's super helpful, and I think that's always a good reminder to remind people to, it's not necessarily that you should expect to have everything perfect, but just knowing that like you can control the way that you feel in a situation most of the time, and like really give yourself that agency to
Yeah, I
to
love that
change
word.
and to control. So I really love that, and I think if everybody in the chat here, and then again we'll save it for you guys too, so you can take a peek at it or check this out later or read the article. If you guys haven't already, I highly encourage you to do the worksheet, because again, writing stuff down was like, whoa, Sarah, okay, didn't know you were so worried about that, but guess what, you have options and you were able to list them. Again, is giving you that power for understanding you have control, probably more control than you actually thought you had.
Yep. And I
So
encourage you to also list a lot of options, like crazy
yeah.
options, because that's how you get, like, we ask our students to brainstorm before they complete a piece of art,
Oh
but
yeah.
sometimes we get locked into having to find the perfect solution right away.
Right.
And so by listing, like, what are all the options, even the crazy ones, like, I could literally, like, I could quit my job and I could go work in a call center and make an equivalent, and I wouldn't be as happy, but that is an option. Like,
Write it down.
most people are not going to do that, but like we always have options.
Yes.
And sometimes the radical ones make you realize, okay, the options in
This
front of me
isn't
aren't
that
as bad as some of the big ones.
right. Like, all right, I got this.
Yep.
I completely agree. All right, well, I'll make sure to link that in our Instagram, and I wanted to just give you a huge thank you, Jessica, because we, of course, love everything that the AOEU has grown into, but also the fact that you are gracing us with amazing articles about leadership, because we know change is always going to be constant, so learning how to be a leader through that change is what the article is all about, and hearing you be so passionate about it is very inspiring. So
Thank
awesome.
you. I love it. I could talk about it all day. So
Just
the parting words to just parting words to everybody is like, remember, like, if you believe you can get through anything, you can get through this. Like, your own confidence is half of the battle, because everyone's going to feed off of you. So be that light. And I think art is just naturally that. So
yeah, absolutely.
And we're here to support you, and trying to come up with as many things as we can to support this back to school time, and shifted a lot of our content to just help address what's happening now, which is, I love that we can be so flexible. So stay tuned, and thanks for being vulnerable and doing the energy assessment and having me on, Sarah.
Yeah, I appreciate it for sure. Okay, well, stay tuned to everybody for some other fun things that are coming up with the Art of Ed. I know there's a webinar coming up about back to school and return to learn. And again, a little quick plug for the return to learn page, because there's all sorts of really awesome stuff about, like, literally, how do I go back to school as an art educator? and what are the like models that we could choose from. They all look a little bit different. So I know I chatted about that last week on the live, but super helpful if you haven't already taken a peek. So have a great afternoon, Jessica, and thank you so much again for joining us.
Absolutely. Good luck, everybody.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.